If you're not functioning well from a safety perspective, if you're having incidents, there's costs associated with that. There's schedule impacts, there's reputational impacts. And so contractors can introduce risk. It's important that we understand those risks so that we can take action to drive performance. Pre-qualification is just a starting point, and it's not a pass or a fail exercise. It's not meant to disqualify contractors. There's a really important opportunity to use things like AI, to use machine learning, to be able to kind of look at that data, identify emerging risks, and then feed emerging risks to project teams so that they can take action. Without safety management systems, you're going to have a very difficult time actually consistently executing against those compliance programs. And that's why it's very much just about driving conversations out in the field, as opposed to maybe what you might have historically thought of as leadership going out in the field and just identifying things that are wrong, right? Unsafe conditions, unsafe behaviors. And so communication, engagement with the frontline workers, hugely important.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Mobilization Mindset. My name is Scott Pieper. I am the CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding. And today I have a great guest, and we're talking safety. We're going to be talking about safety programs. We're going to be talking about safety incidents. We're going to be talking about serious ones, critical ones, how you prevent them, what you do if they happen. And I got a great expert here today from Highwire. We have Dave Tibbetts. He is the Chief Safety Officer at Highwire. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm excited to talk to you about this because, look, man, whether you're talking about insurance, whether you're talking about your team, whether you're talking about leadership, employees, the next job, safety really is a key factor in all the leaders we talk to. They're either worried about their safety program, they're trying to mitigate around something that did happen that they need to manage. They're managing an audit for their insurance, and safety comes up. I mean, safety is not only is it important to keep your employees safe, a job safe, but it is a critical function of the business today.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it's there are multiple reasons why safety is important, right? You touched on it. First and foremost, it's about workers, right? Keeping them safe, making sure nobody gets hurt, especially making sure nobody gets seriously injured or at worst fatalities. So it is the right thing to do. It is an obligation. And so there's that part of it. But you also touched on another aspect of it, which is business, right? Safety is good business. If you're not functioning well from a safety perspective, if you're having incidents, there's costs associated with that. There's schedule impacts, there's reputational impacts. So safety is good business. And of course, it's the right thing to do to keep people safe.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and Highwire. So our typical guest, our typical listener on the show is going to be from construction or construction manufacturing or supplier community, or just someone thinking about leadership, and maybe they're a CEO owner or they're a leader of a business. Give a little indication about Highwire and how you've become the Chief Safety Officer and why that's so important to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll start by giving a little bit of background because it will kind of give context to how I ended up here, and also let me talk about what Highwire is and sort of what we're trying to deliver. So Highwire was actually founded at Harvard University back in 2007 timeframe. And it was founded because Harvard was having a lot of incidents occur across their projects. Harvard had an owner-controlled insurance program, which meant that if the projects performed well, Harvard stood to save a lot of money on insurance. But if the projects performed poorly, they weren't going to realize those savings, right? And in the early stages of that OSIP, projects were not performing well. There were a lot of incidents and a lot of costs associated with those incidents. So they recognized that they needed to do something to turn that performance around. And one of the gaps they identified was that they just didn't have a great way to consistently evaluate the contractors that were bidding and then working on those projects so that they could understand how sophisticated the contractors were from a safety perspective, what the contractors' past safety performance looked like, and really use that data to make a good decision, but also to have conversations with general contractors and with the trade contractors before they started on site. So Harvard created a software which was called Construct Secure initially, which later became Highwire. And the software was meant to allow Harvard to collect data and information from contractors, evaluate that data, and use it to make a decision, and also use it to determine, hey, what is the best path forward to make sure that this contractor has a successful outcome on our projects. It was meant to be collaborative effort between Harvard, between the general contractor, and between the trade contractors. So implemented it. It was very successful. Some of the general contractors were exposed to it during their time working at Harvard. And Skanska was the first sort of company who said, hey, we really like this approach. Would you consider licensing the software to us so we could use it on our non-Harvard projects? Decision was made to do that. Construct Secure became a company, and it's really grown since then, back in 2008, 2009. So now we have clients. Our clients are asset owners, they're general contractors, they're even large specialty trade contractors. And those are companies that hire a lot of contractors to work on their capital projects or perform work in their existing facilities. And so contractors can introduce risk. It's important that we understand those risks so that we can take action to drive performance. That's what Highwire really helps our clients do. Assess contractor risk, put plans in place, and monitor contractor performance so that ultimately everybody can be successful together.
Nice. So let's think about it like from a typical subcontractor or a general contractor, the self-performing work. And we'll focus on subcontractor for a moment. If I'm a subcontractor and I'm thinking now, okay, here's a software that's been designed to evaluate whether I am going to either add risk or make the project safer because of my safety record.
Yep.
What are the things that are being evaluated and how are they being evaluated such that I could actually manage to them?
Yeah. So in most cases with Highwire and with many other solutions that kind of do what we do, there's a combination of things that we're looking at. And, a component of it is their past performance. So, looking at the last 3 years, understanding what a contractor's injury and incident experience has been, what are their incident rates? How do they compare to the industry average? What is their EMR? Have they had any OSHA citations issued to them? And of course, have they had any fatalities in the last 3 years? Those are important factors that allow clients to consider past performance as a component of their assessment. But in addition to that, we also want to look at a contractor's safety programs. We want to look at the sophistication of their safety management systems, which are critical for a contractor's ability to actually execute against their programs, right? We've got to have the management systems in place. So we take a lot of that information in, we analyze it, we assess it, and we produce a result. And so I think, one thing that's important for contractors to understand is that they should, number one, pay close attention to, making sure that they put their best foot forward, making sure that all of their programs and management systems are kind of up to date and are being uploaded into platforms, make sure that all of their past performance is being reported correctly, because clients do care about the result. This is not just an exercise in compliance. Clients will ask you about the result, and you should be prepared to speak to it. If you've had issues or incidents in the past, you should be prepared to speak to that. What types of incidents? What are some common causes? What trends have you identified? What are you doing as a company to improve performance going forward? So it's important to recognize that it is not an exercise in compliance or a check the box exercise. You should be really thoughtful and pay attention to the data that you're putting in and the programs that you're uploading. And you should care about what your result is, because Highwire for sure, and other platforms probably as well, they will give you a result. And we want to give our contractors that are enrolling in Highwire a result that is insightful for them, that identifies opportunities for improvement for them, that shows them how their incident rates are trending and how they compare to the industry average. So, pay attention to the result, see if there are opportunities to improve. But those are some of the things that I would talk about. The last thing I would say is that our mindset and the mindset of our clients is that pre-qualification is just a starting point. And it's not a pass or a fail exercise. It's not meant to disqualify contractors. It's meant to deliver insights that can be used to have important conversations and drive successful outcomes.
Interesting. So I got an interesting thought while I was listening to you. So in your experience working with owner developers or even large general contractors, have you found that obviously safety is clearly important? Not only are they utilizing a platform like Highwire to analyze it, but they want their projects to be safe. And obviously, as you said, there's a lot of cost in that. Well, from a subcontractor side, there's a lot of cost in making sure you have a good safety program and a safety record. And there's also a lot of value in there, which seems to be well recognized by both sides listening to you.
Yep.
Do is this become just a prerequisite to have a good safety program and then we're still going to pick the lowest cost person? Or do you see actually changes in behavior of decision making based on, okay, yeah, they're more costly, but the safety is leading the record? I mean, everyone's offering a fair value. I mean, obviously not, I'm not saying like someone can just charge the super premium, but is it still just a race to the lowest price? Or in the bid process, do you see people winning with a very good safety record and a higher price?
Yeah. I'm really glad you asked that question. It's a very thoughtful question. And I think if we're being honest, right, there are a lot of different reasons why contractors are awarded work. And again, like most notably, it's the competitiveness of their bid, right? If they're capable, if they're available, and they submit a competitive bid, then oftentimes the low bidder is gonna win. The lowest qualified bidder,
Yeah.
right, is gonna win. And so that continues to be the case. And again, that's why this is not a pass or a fail exercise, right? Safety is one component, but it's not the only component. It's not the only criteria. So, there are going to be times where a contractor submits the lowest bid and their pre-qualification result indicates some potential risk, but we are going to move forward with that contractor. So then it becomes about, all right, what are we going to do about that potential risk? How are we going to engage that contractor? What plans are we going to put in place? How are we going to monitor their performance? How do we help make sure that contractor is successful? And maybe through the course of all that sort of collaboration, the feedback that we share, when we do deliver a successful result, there are some lessons to be learned for that contractor as well. Hey, we did some things on this project that really made a difference, made us more efficient, made us more productive, delivered a safe result. Maybe there are some things that we should incorporate into our own business so that we can improve our performance over time, right? Not just on this project. The other side of it, so if we're being honest, competitiveness of the bid is a really important critical factor. If bids are close, right? If bids are close and one contractor is clearly a much better performer or much more sophisticated from a safety perspective, then yes, the contractor with a slightly higher bid may be the one that is selected when they're close, right? That's how I would frame it.
Yeah. So think about like, again, thinking from the owner developer side, that in your experience in the GCs, are they looking at just the serious injuries and fatalities record, or are they looking at, and what weight do they hold to those as compared to like your, what I might just call for to be general, like a normal construction accident, or just, it just happens, things that happen on a construction site.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to kind of shift the discussion a little bit. So the most common incident rate that is talked about in construction and any industry is a recordable incident rate, right? An injury that is classified according to OSHA's record keeping requirements as a recordable incident. And so the idea of kind of tracking serious injuries and fatalities, and maybe even more importantly, tracking events that had the potential to result in a serious injury or fatality, because they're like, knock on wood, right, there are too many fatalities that occur in construction, but from a company perspective, from an aggregated data perspective, there aren't thousands and thousands of them, right? There's not a huge data set to kind of learn from. That's why when we talk about events with SIF potential, there's an opportunity to be able to look at a larger data set. Incidents that had the potential to be something worse, even exposures that occur on a job site that have the potential to be something worse. So in large part, we are assessing a contractor's recordable rates today as a subset of recordables, there are injuries that have resulted in days away from work, right? A lost time injury. So those are more severe outcomes, or injuries that have resulted in restricted duty or job transfer, another subset of recordable rates. So, industry continues to lean on those rates. And there is value in looking at those rates, comparing those rates, having conversations about those rates, but it all needs to be done with context, right? You need to seek to understand what's behind that recordable rate. So kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, industry is still very much focused on those incident rates that we've used historically. There's value in continuing to focus on those, but there is also a shift that is really driving a lot of momentum to say that while we've been able to successfully reduce recordable rate by 80% in the last 30 years, we also recognize that fatality rates in construction in the last 15 to 20 years have been flat. There is no discernible downward trend in fatalities in construction in the last 15 to 20 years. So yes, let's continue to focus on driving down the frequency of all incidents, but let's also dedicate some of our energy and some of our focus to trying to understand why serious injuries or fatalities occur, and to understand when and where near misses, incidents, and exposures with SIF potential are occurring as well, because that will give us a larger data set to learn from, to investigate, and to determine how do we go forward and reduce those exposures.
So you mentioned data, and I'm thinking through like data and predictive analytics are increasingly part of many, many contractor safety programs. How are these tools shifting the focus from reacting to proactive safety management, in your opinion?
Yeah. So, there's so much data collected in construction across all different kind of aspects of construction delivery. And safety is no different than that. There's so much data that is collected from a safety perspective, and sifting through, sorting through that data can become really difficult and burdensome when there's so much other things that we have to do. We've got to be out in the field, engaging with the workforce, planning the work, training, inspections, all those things, right? But there's a lot of data that's collected. And I think it's just important to note from a safety perspective, you've got to be able to use that data to help you identify, where do I focus my efforts? Where do I focus my efforts kind of organizationally? How do I know, which regions are presenting the most risk, which projects are presenting the most risk, which of my trade partners are presenting the most risk? We need data to be able to answer those questions. How do we know, like, which of our safety programs or our processes are actually delivering the desired result? We need to have data to tell us that. And then if you're a safety professional and you want to be able to make a case to leadership that, hey, we should kind of focus on this, or this is something we should do to drive continuous improvement, it's difficult to make that case without the data. So I do think, there's a really important opportunity to use things like AI, to use machine learning, to be able to kind of look at that data, identify emerging risks, and then feed emerging risks to project teams so that they can take action, because it's difficult to sift through that data in kind of a manual way. I will say, one of the differences that I've seen, and it's kind of bringing it back to this discussion about SIF potential, one of our clients is using the data that they've collected on events with SIF potential to drive really awesome engagement from his own project leadership and from his GC partners, right? Where maybe in the past they used to overreact to maybe a spike in recordable rate, even though those recordable incidents may not have had potential to be something more than a cut or a laceration or a sprained ankle. He's now using the data on SIF potential to engage his project executives, his project leaders, and his general contractors to have impactful conversations around the most serious risks. So data is king in a lot of different areas when it comes to safety as well. And, we are talking a lot internally about how to kind of deliver insights better, how to leverage machine learning and AI. So there's a lot that is certainly going to happen and continue to happen in that area. But we've got to be able to deliver insights from this vast set of data that's being collected.
Yeah. So do you have a good example of where someone did this really well on a specific project and like the impact it made? Or maybe with Skanska, and you gave that example in the beginning, how did they utilize this information and then create a more safe or proactive type
Yeah.
environment on a project?
Yeah, I guess I would kind of, if we kind of shifted back to the pre-qualification discussion a little bit, because there's a lot of data that comes through and insights that are delivered through pre-qualification. Skanska is a really good example. David Watts is a safety director in the Boston area for Skanska, and he talks a lot about care for life, the culture of care that Skanska has. And the way that he uses the data is when there is a contractor that is perceived to present some risk based on their assessment result, he engages with that company's leadership. He holds what he calls a care for life meeting, and they sit down and they look at that data together. They talk about what that data means. They talk about what story that data tells about the contractor's performance. And he offers guidance, right? Hey, here are let's talk about some things that you might do to kind of improve performance, right, of your company. And he talks about just how rewarding those engagements are and those relationships are that are built based on that, and how he has seen it help companies improve and grow their safety program over time. So that's kind of one way that data is used in that kind of general contractor, trade contractor relationship, to not only build that relationship, but to help contractors become better performers.
Yeah, so like thinking on that same note, what do you think is the difference between a safety program that's purely just compliance driven and one that actually truly prioritizes people?
Yeah. So when I think about safety programs, in a lot of ways, I'm led to think about the compliance programs, the programs that I have to have in place to be compliant with a regulation, right? OSHA
Mhm.
regulations, most notably in safety. Do I have a fall protection program in place if I have work at heights? Do I have a confined space entry program if my employees are entering manholes or vaults or things like that? So it's kind of table stakes to have well-written, well-defined compliance programs. And everybody should have those. What separates kind of the ability to execute, the sophistication, caring for the worker. A lot of times I will point to safety management systems. Without safety management systems, you're going to have a very difficult time actually consistently executing against those compliance programs. And management systems often define how is leadership involved in safety, right? And it's important that that is defined and there is leadership commitment, but then leaders actually need to walk the walk. They need to be out in the field. They need to be engaging. They need to be speaking to their project teams. Management systems defined roles and responsibilities, right? What is the responsibility of a project executive, a project manager, a superintendent, a frontline supervisor as it relates to safety? And then when we're evaluating the performance of those different team members, are we considering how they've participated? Not looking at, hey, did their projects have good incident rates, right? Not evaluating it based on that, but rather, are those folks who sit in those roles, are they participating? Are they delivering on what their responsibilities are from a safety perspective? Planning processes. Are we out there doing inspections and using those insights? Do we have an accountability program? And on the flip side, are we recognizing workers, work crews, and project teams when they deliver, when they go above and beyond and deliver? Are we empowering employees to stop work if they feel unprepared or they don't know how to mitigate a hazard or there's a hazard present that they didn't expect? Those are the types of things that I think about in taking a compliance program, which is really important, but layering on top of it a sophisticated management system with leadership commitment, leadership engagement, performance monitoring, all those different things, which are really important.
So let's dive a little deeper on that. So let's say you have a safety program and you have a culture of safety, you have a leadership group that actually cares. whether they have always cared or not, maybe there was an incident that just occurred and when everyone's really got their attention. I think a lot of companies probably follow the basic standards, like you said. They bring their people in, they do a training, maybe they even hire a consultant or an expert to do the training with them, and they keep that ongoing. But the best of the best companies probably take it one step further. Maybe there's something they're doing in the field each day. There's a supervisor and a leader of leaders that are actually like taking things one step further. What are those one step further things that the best companies are doing that if I'm a commercial subcontractor right now, doing a few $1 million worth of work or doing tens of millions of dollars worth of work and trying to make the next step, what's that next step thing I could be doing that really makes a big difference in your view?
Yeah. So I'm going to point to an example of a client that we work with, and they are very much focused on leadership engagement, and that means leaders being out in the field, engaging with the workforce. In this particular example, I'm talking about an asset owner, a very sophisticated asset owner in advanced manufacturing, and they care a lot about safety. And one of the things that they want their leaders to do, and this is project executives, this is directors of construction, directors of capital projects, they want their leaders to be out in the field, kind of breaking down barriers, right? Or preconceived notions that the workforce might have of what it means when leadership shows up on site, right? There might be this kind of level of fear or, oh my gosh, leadership from the client is on site. They sort of uh, clench up a little bit or tense up a little bit. And they're using this leadership engagement. Their leadership engagement walks, really. But what's different about it is leadership is not just out there kind of documenting observations of safe or unsafe conditions or behaviors. That's not really what the point of their walks is. The point of their walks is to engage with a worker. So, what type of engagement did they have with the workforce? Was it an introductory engagement? Was it a follow up to a previous engagement? Did they use their time to review a specific activity or safe work plan? And so it's really all around that. And it's kind of creating that relationship, breaking down that barrier, and driving engagement and showing that leadership cares. And that's why it's very much just about driving conversations out in the field, as opposed to maybe what you might have historically thought of as leadership going out in the field and just identifying things that are wrong, right? Unsafe conditions, unsafe behaviors. So I think that's an important one. And if I was to give another example, this kind of ties back to the conversations that are driven by pre-qualification. It becomes very clear how committed leadership is to safety in those conversations around safety performance. You can pretty quickly identify if a leader is committed, if they have their finger on the pulse, when you start to talk about past performance, when you start to ask questions around, hey, what is your company doing to continuously improve based on your past performance or incidents that may have occurred or trends that you've seen? When leadership is able to speak to those things naturally and very clearly articulate, hey, here's where we've been, here's where we're going, here's some of the things that we're doing, and that kind of trickles down throughout the organization. Those are some of the differences or some of the approaches that I've seen that have made a really big difference.
I like it. Yeah, I had a mentor tell me early in my career, Scott, if you want to know what's going on, go talk to the people that are closest to the customer. And I think the equal example of that is if you want to know what's going on in safety, go talk to the people closest to the project and like get out of the management team, supervisor, project managers, and go right to them. And I think in the culture of construction, a lot of times if you did that, you might have the superintendent or the project manager be like, this is my project. Why are they going behind me? I think you need to create a culture among the leadership team that like everyone can talk to the people closest to the project doing the actual work on site.
Yeah.
And the people on site can speak to anybody as well. And that the middle managers there are really created to help bridge the gap of that information, not to like only create a hierarchy of you come to me and I come to you and that's it, like, and I think that would be the free flow of information is probably one of the best indicators of safety, because the people ultimately at the top making decisions need to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Sitting in an office putting a plan together of how work should be done, it might sound great in theory or sound great or look good on paper, but there's a reality to how the work gets done. And so having those conversations and that open line of communication, or making sure that everyone's comfortable saying, "Whoa, hold on, like this is a high risk activity. We thought that this plan was the right plan, but now that we're out here and we're doing the work, we need to take a step back and reevaluate." And that needs to be acceptable, right? That needs, people need to be empowered to do that. And so communication, engagement with the frontline workers, hugely important. And you can get a sense of whether that culture is there almost from the moment that you walk on a job site, right? But
Yeah.
that's what people should be striving for.
Yeah, and morale leads to safety too. I'll give you a great
Absolutely.
example. I was just talking to a construction client of ours, and the leadership team, they were working on a site where the parking was limited, right? They're in a city location, and their folks have to park off-site, and then they're kind of bussed in.
Yep.
Well, two things happen. Like every major city, you have that short window that could be even 5 minutes. Like get on the road now and you're home in an hour. Get on the road in 5 minutes from now and you're home in two, right? And like
Yeah.
you don't know that necessarily if you're off-site working on a project. You certainly don't know that if you're working in a new city, but you do know that when you're on the job site for more than 3 days and you're making the drive. And so the leader came down and worked on this project, make a long story short, and was talking to them. And what they found was the folks were they had to wait when the project was ending that for the day, they had to wait for this bus to get them to where their cars were. And it was taking sometimes upwards of 20, 30, and sometimes even 45 minutes to do it. They made a shift and hired their own bus to come there, and everybody could leave then at like the same exact time, get down there, and they routed this bus, which shrunk the time down to 10 minutes, and their crews didn't have to wait at a pretty nominal cost. And it got everybody, they also moved the shift up a half hour, which got everybody out before the rest of the project was going down and got them off site and home literally an hour sooner by making a very small investment in dollars in this bus and then time. And what it turned into though is there was almost 100 people working on that job site for this construction contractor. They have 100 people now are going in happier and they're leaving happier and they're home back to their families an hour. And you can't even measure that in terms of morale and or safety.
Yeah. What a huge morale booster, right?
And as
Um,
soon as the leader got on the site, he saw it right away and asked the question. So it's not like, oh, why didn't anyone ever tell me? And it's not like you're a terrible project manager for not bringing it to the surface. It's just that's a good example of the value of a leader going onto a site. They'll see things that just they can fix instantly that other people just may not see, or they don't feel comfortable bringing it up, or
yeah.
may not think it's a reality. You could do.
Yeah. I love that story, Scott. That's such a great story.
Yeah, I was
And
like, and that's no brainer. But I think if leaders are listening to this and they're trying to think, well, what am I going to do if I go on the project and just listen to complaints? No, you might not. You might actually come up with this like revolutionary idea and you like win over 100 people. They're going to think you're the greatest person in the world. And sure, you might hear some complaints, but you're not going to, you're going to hear a lot less of them.
yeah. Yeah.
But that's
Right.
a great example of the kind of stuff real leaders from the non not I'm not on a project all the time type of leader going on to a project. Those are the kinds of things you can see and fix.
Yeah. It shows that you care, right? We've been talking about care.
Mhm.
What is your culture of care, right?
That's
That
right.
just shows that you care about you know the workers experience, and make a little change and make their workday better, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it literally costs like $1,000 a week or something stupid to get this bus. Like it was like so nominal. It was like a
Yeah.
rounding error in the project. It was like a joke.
Yeah. If you know
So
what time I should leave in Boston to avoid traffic, let me know, because I'm not sure.
yeah,
I'm not sure there is a window.
no, you're not in one. It's better than it used to be though. Probably before it was really bad during the big dig. I know that my brother was telling me all about that. It was a nightmare, but
Yeah. Yeah.
depends on which way you're going.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to shift gears on you. I got one last topic I really want to
Sure.
drill down. AI and data we mentioned and talked about already. But what are some specific tool? I think AI, machine learning, these all these great buzzwords. But like if I'm trying to think about construction and safety, and I'm like, okay, I want to be in AI, I want to be in machine learning. What is one or two examples that they can implement right now? Like maybe it's the exact software, maybe it's the way they could use ChatGPT. What's something they can do now to implement that without having to have a huge spend that they can figure out and use AI and machine learning to help them?
Yeah. So I can give you an example of something that we've done. I think there are certainly everybody's racing to figure out how to use it to help drive safety outcomes and deliver insights. One of the things that um, has been part of sort of assessing contractors over the years, or maybe it's kind of been more of an exercise just because of the sort of time burden or just the unrealistic expectation of evaluating contractor safety programs, right? So, in a lot of cases, general contractors would collect the safety programs from their trade contractors, and they would probably have a shelf with binders upon binders of safety programs. And as part of evaluating contractors before award or before they start on site, maybe more realistically, is taking a look at contractor safety programs to sort of understand what's in them, their depth, how sophisticated they are. But when you've got hundreds and hundreds of contractors bidding and working across your projects, it's just not realistic to put your eyes on safety manuals and read them and evaluate them and consistently come up with any kind of a real sort of meaningful result. But it is important to understand where gaps might be, how sophisticated or unsophisticated management systems are, because those can drive some really important conversations. One of the things that we've done is we are now using AI to drive the analysis of the safety programs and management systems that are uploaded into Highwire by contractors. Now, we didn't just turn AI, loose and just kind of overlay it on our platform. We recognize that, you need a framework. We created some very detailed instructions and sort of how we wanted AI to do this work and to analyze those programs and how we wanted the results to be delivered. So now we're able to do that analysis in a matter of minutes, provide to our clients an evaluation of a contractor's programs and management systems. If there are any gaps, especially gaps that are relevant based on the contractor's scope of work, those are real conversations that can be had and real plans can be put in place to say, hey, how are we going to make sure that we're working from scaffolding safely during the course of this project, right? We saw a gap in your program as it relates to scaffolding and training and inspections. Let's talk about how we're going to make sure we do this work safely. Or, hey, we saw that you don't really have an inspection and hazard identification process as part of your management system. Here's why that's important. Here's why it might help your business become a safer business and deliver insights to you. So that's one way that we've started to use, AI to drive that. There are other things where, in some ways it requires, the use of software to analyze photos and analyze videos and analyze large data sets. So there's more of that to come. There is certainly a cost associated with that. But, one of the things that I think of mostly as a next step for us is we need to take all of this inspection data. We need to take all of this incident data. We need to take this data about work hours and high risk activities and SIF potential events. We need to be able to real time sift through that data and deliver actionable insights to our clients. So that's where we're heading with it. I may not have an example of some kind of low cost things that folks can do, but there are certainly things that are being done to help improve processes and outcomes with AI.
Well, I've seen contractors utilize even just ChatGPT to really ask if one, analyze a lot of data, but also ask for opinions and questions. Like, for
Yep.
example, if you're trying to figure out the best way to layer in the scaffolding, you're trying to figure out the best way to put different safety I mean, you could definitely take a huge safety program, analyze that data, upload the actual site plan, upload the finished
Yep.
building, if this is the case, upload the project schedule, and ask it for some suggestions on the best way to do things. It may not come up with the right suggestion, but it might come up with suggestions that trigger you to know exactly what to do and point you in the right direction. And I think utilizing it in that way is incredible, especially at the speed and efficiency that it can be done.
Yeah, I will tell you, it's every time that I've used it, and I did a lot of work in the last 2 years to kind of develop that process for evaluating the safety documentation. But I've used it for other things and examples like you just mentioned, where you can really just ask some questions of ChatGPT. I've always been incredibly impressed with how quickly it spits out a response and how really impressive those results have been. So an example that you used was like just asking ChatGPT questions. And, there's this idea that like for smaller contractors, right, who don't have a full-time safety professional, who don't have the same resources as the bigger firms, who want to understand more about safety management systems. Hey, what are the benefits of implementing an incentive and recognition program? And then how would I go about doing that, right? Like even just asking simple questions like that, it's going to give you insights that help you while you might not have the resources internally to kind of build those things. But if you recognize that an inspection and hazard identification program is important, um, uh, um, incentive and recognition programs are important, accountability programs are important. And establishing annual goals and objectives. How would I go about doing that? It's a really great example that you just gave. Using Chat GPT, asking the questions, getting the guidance. It is a really great resource for things like that. And I would encourage, smaller contractors to use it because you are going to get a meaningful and oftentimes a really good result.
Yeah. So I got one last question for you. The show's called The Mobilization Mindset. So from a safety perspective, if there was one mindset shift that you would hope contractors could just change from what's normal thought process to just a little bit of a modification of mind shift change for safety and the benefits of the programs of safety and their employees, what would be one slight mindset shift that a contractor could make to better improve their safety programs and the culture of their overall safety inside the organization?
Yeah, I think I'm going to point to kind of go back to SIF prevention a little bit here, and I want to recognize that we talked a lot about recordable rate during the course of our discussion today, and recordable rate has been a primary measure of success for safety for years and years and years, right? And we are right to celebrate driving down recordable rates, and when companies drive down their recordable rate, there is no issue with celebrating that, recognizing that it is right to do that, right? But um, I think organizations should look beyond their recordable rate, be honest with themselves, and recognize that it can be misleading. It can be misleading in both directions. You could have a really great recordable rate, a very low recordable rate, but at the same time, you could be having exposures and events occur on your projects that had the potential to result in a serious injury or fatality. And that is reality. I've seen it time and time again. I had a very sharp focus on recordable rate back in my time in the field, but I also acknowledge that even though our recordable rate was better than industry average, we were still having significant exposures that occurred across our projects. So I would encourage organizations to learn more about the concept of SIF prevention and understanding the concept of SIF potential events and use that in parallel or in combination with recordable rate, right? Two things can be true. We could have a really good recordable rate, but we could also be having significant exposures on our job sites. Be honest with yourself about that. Focus on the highest risk activities and learn from events that had SIF potential. The way that you respond to those events is really important. Those should be looked at as learning opportunities, opportunities to engage the workforce, opportunities to identify places where you can improve as a company in your approach to planning, in your approach to training, in your approach to conducting inspections out in the field, focusing on the highest risk activities, learning from those SIF potential events. Those could be the things that help us reduce fatality rates, just like we've reduced recordables over the last 30 years.
I love it. I love it. Well, Dave, man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and insight. How can people find you and Highwire if they want to find out some more information? What's
Yeah,
the best ways to reach you?
yeah, absolutely. So if they want to learn more about Highwire, highwire.com, obviously, can find Highwire on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Should be relatively easy to find me there. And I can also be reached at dave@highwire.com if anyone wants to talk more or has some direct questions. So always interested and open to talking about mitigating risk and delivering safe and successful outcomes.
I love it. I love it. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this show. If we got some information and you found value in this, please share this episode. Utilize the information. You can find out more information on our YouTube channel as well, mobilizationfunding.com, our website. And until next time, I hope you all have a great week and may God bless you.